The night sky was a battlefield long before the warships arrived. Shattered clouds boiled in the wake of a burning streak tearing through the atmosphere. It howled like a wounded beast, a Zalari scout ship, spiraling toward the ruins of old Chicago. The heat of its descent turned the skyline into a flickering nightmare, darkened skyscrapers cut against the glow of the incoming wreck. Commander Alex Rains watched from the cockpit of his drop ship, helmeted, silent, waiting for impact. He had seen ships fall before, but this was different. The Zalari never crashed. Not unless something had gone very, very wrong. "Impact in 30 seconds, his pilot called out, voice tight. "LZ is hot, reading multiple hostiles inbound." Rains activated his comms. "All units, we land in 20. This isn't a recovery mission. This is a denial operation." No one needed further explanation. The Zalari had been waging their cold war against humanity for years, watching, testing, but never committing to full-scale annihilation. Whatever was on that ship, it was worth more than their lives. The crash hit like an earthquake. Fire and steel screamed as the ship plowed through broken city blocks, carving a trench of molten slag. The shockwave ripped through the ruins, glass shattered, rusted cars flipped like toys, and what little power remained in the city grid flickered once before dying completely. The EDF dropships were already descending. "Go! Go! Go!" Boots slammed against concrete as Rains and his squad hit the ground running. The air smelled of burning metal and charred ozone. Steam hissed from cracked asphalt, the heat from the wreck still rolling off in waves. Dust and ash clung to their visors. He raised a fist. "Eyes up! Secure the perimeter!" Soldiers fanned out, weapons sweeping the rubble. The scout ship loomed ahead, a grotesque fusion of organic plating and blackened alloys, its sleek, predatory frame broken in half by the force of impact. Jagged rents exposed its insides, a pulsating biomechanical interior, veins of dark blue light flickering weakly along its hull. "Contact!" The shout came from his left. Sergeant Vickers had spotted movement near the wreckage. Figures in scavenged armor, human warlords, local raiders who had thrived in the chaos after Earth's fall from power. They were already converging, drawn like vultures. One of them made a mistake, stepping into the open, hoping to parley. Rains shot him in the head. A beat of silence. Then the whole street erupted in gunfire. EDF soldiers took cover, exchanging disciplined bursts with the raiders. Rains ducked behind a rusted-out vehicle, switching his rifle to full auto. He squeezed the trigger, sending a controlled volley into a cluster of enemies trying to flank. 2 dropped instantly. A rocket shrieked past, slamming into a building. The old structure groaned before collapsing in a storm of steel and dust. "Push forward!" Rains barked. "We take the ship!" His squad surged, pressing the attack. The raiders faltered, outgunned and outmatched. They scattered into the ruins, vanishing as quickly as they had come. No time to regroup. Rains turned toward the wreckage. "Vickers on me. We breach now." The entrance was a jagged wound in the hull, twisted metal peeling back like torn flesh. Rains climbed in first, boots crunching over a fluid that wasn't oil, wasn't blood, but something in between. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly, as if alive biomechanical systems struggling to reboot. Vickers cursed. "What the hell is this place?" It looked almost organic, like the ship had grown rather than been built. Translucent cables hung from the ceiling like nerves, sparking intermittently. The air was thick, charged, and wrong. Then Rains saw it. The pilot's chamber. Or rather, what was left of it. A Zalari warrior, impaled against the wall by its own ship's internal defenses. Its armor was cracked, exposing sinewy flesh that pulsed with dying embers of bioluminescence. The blackened veins running up its arms suggested some kind of rapid biological decay. It wasn't dead yet. Rains raised his rifle. But before he could pull the trigger, the Zalari spoke. "You should not be here." Its voice crawled into his skull, not through sound, but through something older, deeper, a language buried in the back of his mind, scraping against instincts he didn't know he had. Rains kept his weapon trained. Why? The Zalari's glowing eyes dimmed, flickering like a failing star. It coughed, or maybe laughed. Because they are coming. The air shifted. A sound distant but growing, a low hum, vibrating through his bones. Sir? Vickers said, voice tense. We're picking up inbound signals. Big ones. Not raiders. Rains pressed his earpiece. Control status report. A crackle. Then, Commander, get out of there now. We've got incoming warships, multiple alien signatures. His grip tightened on his rifle. Not possible. The Zalari never committed to direct engagements, not like this. Unless. His eyes snapped back to the dying alien. They're not here for you, are they? The Zalari smiled. A cold dread settled in Rain's gut. They weren't here to rescue their scout. They were here to erase it. Burn the ship, Rains ordered. Now. Vickers hesitated. Sir, we haven't even pulled the data. That's the problem, Rains snapped. Whatever's on this ship, they don't want us to have it. That makes it more dangerous than anything we've ever seen. The Zalari's voice whispered through the walls. You cannot stop what's coming. Rains ignored it. Set charges. We blow it and exfil immediately. His squad moved, placing detonators along the core structure. Then, out of the corner of his eye, movement. Not human. Not Zalari. Something else. A shadow unfurling from the depths of the ship, rising from the fractured walls like it had been waiting. A voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. The last war never ended. Rain spun, but the thing was already gone. Outside, the skies burned. The Zalari fleet had arrived. The sky was burning. Rain sprinted through the shattered husk of old Chicago, boots slamming against debris-littered concrete. The Zalari warships had descended like reapers, blotting out the stars with their sleek, black hulls. Plasma lances carved through the skyline, reducing entire blocks to molten slag. Behind him, the wreckage of the alien scout ship groaned as the charges his team had set detonated in a chain reaction. A pulse of white-hot energy erupted from its core, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The explosion tore through the ruins, incinerating what little remained of the crash site. Move, move, move! EDF soldiers scattered, evading falling debris and enemy fire. Rains hid cover behind an overturned transport, gripping his rifle, eyes scanning the chaos. A dozen hostiles inbound, human, not alien. Traitors. A rogue Earth faction, armed with scavenged tech and Zalari weapons, emerging from the smoke like jackals. They hadn't come to fight the invaders, they had come to profit. A familiar voice crackled over his earpiece. Colonel Hayes, EDF High Command. Commander, what the hell is going on out there? Situation's gone nuclear. Rains snapped back, shifting to get a better vantage point. The Zalari aren't here to rescue their own, they're here to wipe the slate clean. Something inside that ship scared them enough to bring in a full war fleet. Static. Then, Hayes' voice lower, grimmer. Do you have the data? Rains wiped soot from his visor. They hadn't had time to extract anything. But something inside that ship had spoken to him. Something old. Something that knew what was coming. No, Rains admitted. But we've got something bigger. A moment of silence. Then, understood. Get back to the Citadel. Now. Rains had no time to question the urgency in Hayes' voice. Because at that moment, the traitors opened fire. Gunfire ripped through the air, forcing him back down. Bullets and plasma rounds tore into the wreckage, sending showers of sparks and molten steel. EDF! One of the traitors bellowed. Drop your weapons and we might let you live! Rains laughed darkly. They weren't here to take prisoners. He signaled Vickers and his team. Flank left, suppressive fire. We take them out now. The first shot was his. A single round through the skull of the loudest bastard. Then everything erupted. Vickers and the squad moved like predators, emerging from the smoke, rifles chattering. The traitors fell back, but they had Zalari plasma carbines, superheated bolts tearing through cover, scorching the ground where Rains had been a second before. Rains switched to burst fire, picking off a second target with surgical precision. One of the enemy soldiers lunged at him, a brute in scavenged power armor, swinging a Zalari blade that hummed with energy. Rains ducked, rolling under the strike, then jammed his combat knife into the gap beneath the man's jaw. A twist. A gurgling choke. The body hit the ground. He didn't stop moving. Vickers took out another with a well-placed grenade, the explosion ripping apart the traitor's cover. A last survivor tried to flee, but a single shot from Rain's sidearm ended that thought. Silence fell over the battlefield. Rains scanned the bodies, eyes narrowing at the insignia on their armor. Not just scavengers. Organized. Funded. His calm crackled again. A new voice. Rains. If you're hearing this, you're already too late. His blood ran cold. He knew that voice. Captain Elias Ward. Former EDF. Former friend. Now? A traitor. You should have died in the first invasion, Alex. Ward continued, his voice mocking. You and your kind, clinging to a dead world, fighting wars you've already lost. But don't worry. You won't have to hold on much longer. Rains clenched his teeth. Where are you? Oh, I'm close, Ward said smoothly. And I've got something you don't. Then came the sound of ships landing. Not Zalari. Human. Rains peered over the wreckage and his breath hitched. A rogue fleet was descending, dropships spilling out mercenaries in advanced combat armor. They were moving with military efficiency. Ward had sold out Earth. Rains turned to Vickers. We need to move. Now. We're pinned, sir, Vickers growled. And we're outnumbered. Rains glanced at the bodies of the fallen traitors. Then at the Zalari weapons they carried. He smirked. Not for long. 15 minutes later. The enemy was expecting a desperate retreat. What they got was an ambush. Rains and his team turned the traitors' own weapons against them. Plasma carbines, Zalari explosives, everything that had been scavenged, now in the hands of the EDF. The first mercenary squad that entered the ruins was wiped out in seconds. Plasma fire cut through their armor like paper. A second squad fell before they could call for backup. Then came Ward. His voice boomed over an open channel. Still alive, Rains? I gotta admit, you never stop surprising me. Rains loaded a fresh power cell into his plasma rifle. Yeah? That's because you never learned to respect your enemies. A pause. Then laughter. Oh, Alex. You really think this is about me versus you? Rains didn't like the way he said that. Then the ground shook. A Zalari warship was landing. Not attacking. Landing. The mercenaries fell back toward it, forming a defensive line. Rains narrowed his eyes. Why weren't they fighting the Zalari? Unless they were working together. Sir? Vickers murmured. Tell me I'm not seeing what I think I'm seeing. Rains exhaled sharply. Ward's not just a traitor. He's a collaborator. Then came the final nail in the coffin. The Zalari's supreme strategist, Overlord Kthira, descended from the warship, flanked by an honor guard. He was huge. Regal. And worst of all, he looked at Ward the same way a general looks at an asset. Rains' gut twisted. Earth was never the target, he whispered. Vickers turned. What? Rains clenched his jaw. The Zalari aren't here to wipe us out. They're here to use us. And Ward had just handed them the means to do it. Above them, the sky darkened as more Zalari ships arrived. This wasn't just a battle. This was the beginning of something worse. Something humanity wasn't prepared for. Rains had been in hopeless situations before, trapped behind enemy lines, outgunned, outmanned. But this was suicide. Across the ruined cityscape, Ward stood alongside Kthira, his former commander turned traitor. The Zalari overlord was massive, his black exoskeletal armor reflecting the orange glow of the burning skyline. Behind them, alien troops moved in tight formations, side by side with mercenary units in advanced combat armor. The collaboration was complete. Tell me, Rains. Ward's voice carried over an open channel, mocking, amused. At what point did you realize you lost? Rains cut the feed. He didn't have time for Ward's monologue. He needed an opening, a weakness, anything that could turn the tide. Vickers, he muttered, gripping his plasma rifle. Options? Run or die, Vickers said grimly. Rains scanned the battlefield. Retreat was impossible. They had Zalari warships cutting off every escape route, and the ground forces were locking in a kill box. That left only one move. They had to go through them. Vickers, listen carefully, Rains said. We're not escaping. Vickers frowned. Then what the hell are we doing? Rains checked his remaining ammo. Not enough for a prolonged fight. Didn't matter. We're gonna punch a hole, he said. Right through the bastard standing in front of us. Vickers exhaled slowly. Kthira? Rains nodded. The second he falls, everything changes. Vickers cursed under his breath. Hope you've got a plan. Rains glanced at the wreckage around them. They were sitting on a battlefield of ruined tech, old war machines, and scavenged alien weapons. Yeah, he said. I've got a plan. 5 minutes later. The Zalari forces advanced, their disciplined formations contrasting sharply with the mercenary squads, who moved in looser packs, bristling with scavenged human and alien weapons. Rains and his team were waiting. Hidden among the rubble, they had repurposed Zalari explosives, hacked plasma turrets, and reactivated a half-broken automated defense drone buried beneath the ruins. It wasn't much. But it was enough. The first explosion came from a collapsed skyscraper. A controlled detonation. Steel and concrete rained down, crushing the first wave of advancing mercenaries. Then came the plasma fire. EDF soldiers unleashed hell from their fortified positions, cutting down anything that moved. The drone, jury-rigged into operational status, swept the battlefield with laser precision, dropping enemy units one by one. The Zalari staggered. They hadn't expected humans to fight back this hard. Kthira raised a clawed hand, his voice booming through the comms. Advance. Show them their resistance is meaningless. The Zalari pressed forward, methodical, ruthless. But that was exactly what Rains wanted. Now! He barked. The second explosion ripped through their left flank. Rains and Vickers charged into the chaos, plasma rifles barking, moving fast, using smoke and wreckage as cover. Rains dropped 3 mercenaries in quick succession, moving like a predator through the battlefield. Vickers covered his flank, taking out a Zalari officer before they could sound a retreat. They were close now. 50 meters from Kthira. Then Ward stepped forward. Rains! He called out, voice mocking, laced with amusement. Do you even know what you're fighting for anymore? Rains didn't hesitate. He fired. Ward was fast. Too fast. He sidestepped the shot, rolling behind cover. Still predictable, Ward taunted. You always were too stubborn for your own good. Rains growled, moving to cut the distance. He had to end this, now. Then Kthira moved. And everything shifted. The Zalari overlord crossed the battlefield in a blur of motion, his black blade igniting with crackling energy. Rains barely had time to raise his rifle before Kthira was on him. The impact sent him flying. He crashed into a rusted-out transport, pain lancing through his ribs. His visor fractured, HUD flickering. Kthira loomed over him. You fight like a dying animal, the alien overlord rumbled. It is almost admirable. Rains gritted his teeth, forcing himself up. You talk too much. Kthira tilted his head. You cannot win this war. Your species is an anomaly, one that should have perished long ago. I am simply correcting history. Rains spat blood. Funny. We were thinking the same thing about you. Then he triggered the final charge. A shockwave blasted outward, throwing Kthira off balance. Rains surged forward, blade drawn, slashing upward, not aiming to kill, but to wound. The blade sliced through Kthira's shoulder armor, drawing dark, luminescent blood. The alien hissed in surprise. For the first time, Cthulhu felt pain. Rains didn't stop. He grabbed a Zalari energy detonator, stolen from the battlefield, and jammed it against Cthulhu's chest. The Overlord's eyes widened. Checkmate, Rains snarled. He slammed his fist against the detonator's trigger. A blinding explosion engulfed them both. Aftermath. Rains awoke to the sound of gunfire fading. Smoke curled in the air. The battlefield was littered with fallen Zalari and mercenary corpses. Vickers was pulling him up. You still breathing? Rains groaned. Everything hurt. Unfortunately. He looked toward the impact crater where Cthulhu had stood. The Zalari overlord was gone. Dead? Maybe. But the Zalari war fleet was already retreating. Ward was nowhere to be seen. The coward had run. Rains exhaled, trying to ignore the pain lancing through his body. Vickers clapped him on the back. You actually did it, sir. Rains gave a tired smirk. Yeah, he muttered. But something tells me this was just the beginning. His calm crackled. Hayes' voice. Commander Rains. We have a problem. Of course they did. Rains sighed. How bad? Static. Then. New fleet inbound. Not Zalari. Something worse. Rains froze. Whatever had spoken to him inside that ship, it wasn't Zalari. And now, it was coming. Rains sat on the edge of a ruined transport, watching the Zalari fleet retreat beyond the burning skyline. The battle was over for now. But his gut told him the war had just begun. The ground still smoldered from plasma fire. Corpses, human and alien alike, littered the streets, their armor reflecting the sickly glow of the ruined city. The air was thick with smoke, blood, and the stench of war. And yet something else lingered. A presence. Not Zalari. Not human. Something older. His earpiece crackled. Hayes' voice came through, tense. Commander Rains. We have a situation. Yeah, Rains muttered, dragging himself upright, muscles protesting. Figured as much. How bad? Static. Then. Bad enough that I need you back at the Citadel immediately. We just picked up a new fleet inbound. Not Zalari. Rains stiffened. What? Reading over 24 ships, all unregistered. No known patterns, no signals. They're moving in fast, silent, coordinated. Like ghosts. A new fleet. Not Zalari. His mind flashed back to the wreckage of the alien scout ship, to the moment before it burned. The whisper in the dark. The last war never ended. Rains didn't believe in coincidences. How long do we have? He asked. 2 hours. Maybe less. Rains turned to Vickers, who was patching up one of their wounded. Round up the squad. We're moving. Vickers gave him a hard look. Where? Back to base. If Hayes is worried, we're already behind schedule. EDF Command, the Citadel. The Citadel stood like a defiant fist against the stars, a fortress carved from the bones of old Earth's last defenses. Rains walked through the war room, boots heavy against the steel floor. Screens flickered with fleet movements, radar scans, classified data. The air was tense, officers barking orders, analysts running simulations. In the center of it all, Hayes stood over a hollow map of Earth's orbit. Rains stepped forward. Tell me what I'm looking at. Hayes turned. His face was pale. This, he said, gesturing at the display. Rains followed his gaze. A fleet. Massive. Silent. In formation. But it wasn't Zalari. It wasn't any known species. Rains narrowed his eyes. No comms? Nothing. No transmissions, no identifiers. They're just watching. That was worse than an attack. The Zalari had always been aggressive, predictable in their hostility. But this? This was something else. A cold, methodical presence. Rains studied the shapes of the ships. They were wrong. Jagged. Uneven. Like something had built them for war and then forgotten why. Something ancient. Then, the first signal came through. A transmission, cutting across every EDF channel simultaneously. The screens flickered. A voice emerged, deep, resonant, and human. "You are awake." Silence gripped the room. The voice continued unfazed, patient, absolute. "We have watched you. You are not ready." A cold chill ran down Rain's spine. Hayes clenched his fists. "Who are you?" "Static." "Then? We were the first war. The war before the stars burned. And now, the cycle begins again." Rains gritted his teeth. "Why are you here?" Another pause. "Then, to finish what we started." The first strike. The attack came without warning. 1 second, the fleet hovered in silent menace. The next, the sky turned to fire. Orbital defense stations exploded in rapid succession, detonated before they could fire a single shot. Missiles launched toward Earth, not aimed at cities, but at military installations, power grids, strategic hubs. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to cripple. "Scramble all fighters!" Hayes barked, shoving officers into motion. "Get me firing solutions on those ships, now!" Rains was already moving, grabbing his gear, strapping into battle armor. "Vickers, you with me?" Vickers grinned grimly. "Was hoping for some downtime." "Guess not." A blast rocked the citadel. Alarms blared. Rains pressed his earpiece. "Command, what's the status on counteroffensives?" "Static." "Then?" "Sir, we're losing systems. They're overriding our networks." Rains stopped cold. "Override? It's not hacking. It's like they were built into the system before we were." A realization hit like a hammer. "This isn't their first time here," Rains muttered. Vickers shot him a look. "The hell does that mean?" Rains didn't answer. Because he already knew. They had been here before. The forgotten enemy. The voice returned. "You fight well. But you do not understand what you are fighting." Rains clenched his fists. "Then tell me." "Static." "Then? You are the remnants of a war you never knew existed. Your kind was never meant to rise again." The room fell silent. Hayes exhaled slowly. "My God!" Rains pieced it together. The Zalari weren't humanity's greatest enemy. They were just another empire in the void. This fleet? It had fought humans before. And won. He turned to Hayes. "We're not the first iteration of humanity." Hayes' face was grim. "No. We're just the first to survive this long." The room plunged into chaos. Officers screamed into comms, barking orders, calling for reinforcements. But Rains already knew the truth. No reinforcements were coming. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about finishing what their ancestors started. The real war had just begun.